introductions?
Sure. So my name is Megan Metzger. I'm the CEO of DCode, and we focus on all things related to government tech and innovation. So we run tech accelerators to help emerging technologies understand how to work more effectively with the government, and we help advise and train the government on how to be more forward-leaning, innovative, and better stewards of innovative capabilities.
Hey, Major Austin Bryan. I'm the Chief Operations Officer at Platform One. I've been doing that for about 2 years, was there at its founding, and so I've done everything between manage cash flows, talk acquisitions, review code, whatever it really takes. So happy to be here.
And hi, everyone. I'm Captain Rachel Zoll. I'm the Chief of Product for Kobayashi Maru, which is the Space C2 program office falling under the Space Force, but I'm still an Air Force captain. Got to keep represent. My main focus is everything and anything and everything product. Just trying to kind of align our organization and really support not only our stakeholders, but our customers and our product teams. So excited to be here.
Awesome. So obviously this is an outcomes-based panel. We're really focused on emphasizing outcomes over output. We often hear that in the Department of Defense. So what would you say, what does outcomes over output really mean? What's the goal of focusing on outcomes? Rachel, if you want to start.
Sure. And I would say too, I love that saying. It's also a really great foundational book. Really quick read that really kind of sets the standard and sets kind of a good understanding that you can start to wrap your mind around what even is an outcome. So something I like in the book and something that I kind of am looking to align KM around is that outcome is that change in a human's behavior that really drives business value. So I think when we're thinking about outcomes, we're thinking, what is that behavior? How do we define that behavior? How do we measure that? How do we communicate that progress? And that mindset shift, there's a huge mindset shift from thinking about just an output of this is the task or the thing or the feature, and actually what the value is that the user or maybe whoever your customer is, because it could be your end user of the product, but it could also be maybe your colleague, maybe someone from a different team that works in your organization or your stakeholder. There's a lot of ways that you can kind of look at that value.
Sure. So it's a great question. I think a lot of times as an engineer in the Air Force, one of our main jobs that I tell young engineers is kind of evaluating through the warfighter's eyes, because we work with a lot of vendors every day, right? And it's really easy to get obsessed with the technology stack or sprint planning, and all these things are really just experiments on how to do something. But when you stay at that lower level and you kind of operate in a silo, you forget sometimes that you're trying to change an outcome for the warfighter, right? So that interaction with customers is a big deal, and trying to define, how do we outpace China and Russia? How do we stay ahead? Why does technical competency matter? Why does delivering software fast matter? And so at Platform One, we've really implemented OKRs, which I know are very popular and everybody has opinions on them. But it was really fun to do at Platform One because we got really obsessed with the tech stack for a very long time. People probably have that opinion anyways of us. But in a discussion on outcomes is really interesting because it really helps you focus. Like scaling has been a very tough thing for all of us, I think, in the innovation system. And it's really hard the main part of scaling really becomes like, what do you say no to? Because it's really easy, like, hey, if can do it and we have the software talent too, we should just do it. That's actually really dangerous because then you end up doing a bunch of things really, really poorly. And so focusing on the outcomes you're trying to achieve 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now really helps you say no to the right things and focus on the right things.
Sure. So we've trained people across the entire DoD. So I think bringing a little bit of a perspective of what we've noticed across all of the different services. And this is so important, and it sounds very obvious, and outcomes, of course, everyone wants outcomes. At the end of the day, we can't confuse activity with productivity. And if no one uses it, or if no one gets any value out of it, then you've wasted all of your time. So if we aren't focused on what success is for the people that are going to be using it, the airmen, the guardians, anyone, then we've built it for nothing. So, we can create a lot of code, we can put out a lot of functions and features, but if it doesn't, have one more user pick up the software and use it, if it doesn't attract one more user to come to the platform, then we didn't actually achieve any outcome.
I love that. And I think this all ties back to culture and how do you build a culture that supports an outcomes-based model. I think all of us have advocated and work in organizations that advocate for the government understanding software development and building software, and training acquisition professionals, or enabling the government to build software for whatever mission outcomes there are. So, like, can you describe what each of your kind of organizations are doing to really enhance and emphasize that government-led software development or government-led like business model that ensures like, hey, that the government understands what we're actually building and buying? Megan, do you want to start?
Sure. So, very loaded question. Of course,
Yes.
there's a lot that needs to happen around culture. What my organization is doing is we are providing training and workshopping across every level, from senior leaders, and we've even trained 4 stars down through enlisted. And I think the hardest part about focusing on outcomes, truthfully, is how do you actually measure it, and then how do you incentivize and give that psychological safety in that top cover so that people know it's okay, that if we're working towards an outcome and along the way we get it wrong and we course correct, that's okay. And so I think a lot of times we're measuring success based on whether or not we got the exact outcome the way that we thought that outcome needed to happen. But sometimes the way that we get to the outcome ends up looking extremely different, and that's okay. And that's a hard adjustment for a lot of people to make because you measure that very differently. And I'll come back to that later.
Yeah, Hannah picked a lot of great questions for this panel, and this is one that's near and dear to my heart for sure. So I think if you look across the Air Force and how we do operations, every single time we have weapon systems or lives on the line, it's government led, right? We have government people executing the mission. And I think what the Air Force is finally realizing is that we have to do the same thing with our software. Your agility in software delivery comes from people who understand software delivery, right? And actually what's going on in the code base. So we've done 2 things, I think. So our acquisition strategy, we actually hire for talent and services, right? And then we mix product teams across multiple vendors. So we don't have any singular thing owned by company X or Y. You have a single product that has company X, Y, and Z all on it. And then that gets really tough, right? It's really hard to manage vendors that way. And the way we mitigate that, and it's been a long road to get there, like literally 2 years it's taken us, but getting software developers that are governments that embed with them, so you have some continuity in the code base, you have some technical oversight, people that actually understand, like, is there being value delivered, right? Is there that accountability in the contract? That's kind of the 2 ways, both from an acquisition strategy and kind of manpower perspective, we've addressed that.
Yeah, and so being an acquisition program as well. So acquisition strategy, Austin touched on that. So I'll touch on also how we take care of the folks that are also still with us, who are in our units, our government members, our military, or civilians, looking to enable those practices, build those practices, keep that learning mindset alive. At KM, we feel the same constraints that a lot of people feel in our manning and our resourcing, but we value who we have, and we know we're lucky to get to be able to work together in the creative space that we can. So we also want to make sure that we are not taking that for granted, and setting ourselves up for success to make our workplace somewhere that people want to work, but also people want to come to. So I know there's talent management kind of in works as well, just to we give that feedback back about how we partner with other organizations and other programs like Supercoders and the Galaxy program, where they're also enabling and like developing that skill set, and we try to kind of keep those relationships kind of tight, and those the ties close, so that we can hopefully leverage that skill set too, and continue that relationship, keep this workforce growing.
Yeah, I mean, talent management, I think, is probably the biggest piece of this to be in order to be successful. And a lot of the work that you do, Megan, with training, and a lot of the work that you both do in ensuring that the government like has an airman understand what software is and how to build software. But that is incredibly difficult. I think you'll hear a later panel with our Army Software Factory team on talent management and recruitment and retention. And it honestly is probably the biggest limiting factor to us being successful and being able to scale a lot of these like software factories and software innovation. So, what are you all collectively doing with each of your organizations to ensure, one, that there is that talent retention, management, recruitment, knowledge transfer, but also getting folks aligned with what is needed, what skill sets are needed to be able to do this? Austin, do you want to start?
Sure. My favorite topic, maybe, because my leadership's heard it several times. I think this entire system we built, maybe in the Air Force, I can only speak for us because I'm not as familiar with the Army side, but it's kind of built on a house of cards, right? I look around for the people that are doing this and doing this well, and there's not many people, and I'm worried about like, well, who's the next 3 or 4 people that are going to do it, or scaling that to 50 to 60. I mean, it's not a crazy problem that's unbounded that we need hundreds and thousands of like government developers running around to different downtown locations and buildings and like writing code, but we need the right blend, right? And so I think I personally believe recruitment wise, we bring in people that know software. I think we anymore today, people know how to write code to some degree, even if they're a hobbyist when they come in. I think the problem is really more about training and development and like retention, right? I've seen a lot of people across our space kind of develop their own training pipelines, pairing with different partners from industry, which is great, but like we don't have a standardized set of skills like we value. Everybody's kind of solving it locally. And I don't think the Air Force has come out and said like, these are the 3 things or 5 things or whatever. And this is how you manage a career, right? In this. And I think that gets into the retention problem, is that people get done with an assignment at one of these things. And typically there's probably only 2 or 3 other places in the Air Force you can go to keep working on it. And a lot of that is being managed, at maybe the 05, 06 level, people calling up their peers and saying, hey, I got this great person, they're available, let them go there. But there's no like career field for it, right? We're using 2210s in civilians or 855s, 62s on the outside, 3DX4s, a bunch of different AFSCs, but nobody's saying like this is the career field that should be developed into this. And people are leaving mostly because they don't have the opportunity to keep doing it. And not only that, if you stay in it for too long, they're like, well, you're not following the normal trajectory of checking boxes, so like you need to leave, right? So yeah, I don't have a great solution to the problem besides trying to handle it at a local level. But I think there's some ideas out there that we could scale if we had some resources.
As a 2210 who's not an IT specialist, I can definitely relate to that. It's kind of the catch-all for on the civilian side. Megan, you want to go ahead?
Sure. So obviously I'm coming from a little bit from the outside, but I did a panel once and I had 3 individuals and we called it Recovering DoD Innovators. And they all got out for a lot of the reasons that he mentioned. And one of the questions was, okay, what is one thing that you wish your leadership knew about why you left? And he said, I wanted top cover and I wanted someone to trust that I knew the problem. And if they had just done that, I would have stayed forever. And so and that really haunted me, right? To say, here are all these incredible people that are really talented. They know software development. They are close to the mission and the problem. So that human-centered approach is more possible than ever with the software factories. And we have to give them that top cover, give them the leeway to do what they know how to do. And then, of course, change all these policies and keep them in, adjust the way that we pay and all of those millions of things. But some of it's simple in retention, and it comes down to culture.
Yeah. What about you, Rachel?
So I also feel this to my core because I think I was maybe faced with that decision myself just recently, and I was so thankful, and I am so thankful every day to the leadership that believed in me and decided to kind of fight on both sides to get me to the position that I'm in now, from where I was before at Kessel Run. So I want to be a part of the solution here. I think if anything right now, I'm just kind of trying to prove out that value. Like we talk, there's a lot of talk. There's definitely more proof, and when we are able to show it and kind of show why it's important, why it should be valued, why it should be taken seriously, and why it should be prioritized. I think that's how I'm trying to approach it, especially in the stage the Kobayashi Maru is at, where we're definitely at the beginning of a big transformation for us as a software factory. And there's a lot of work there, and I think we're just trying to be heads down, kind of prove out that concept here.
Yeah. And Rachel, I think yours is a great case. I remember when you were asking for an additional year at Kessel Run, and everyone said, oh, it's going to ruin her career. She spent 4 years at Hanscom Air Force Base. This is detrimental to her success as an officer. And just totally poo-pooing the idea of, hey, I'm actually providing value here. I'm actually doing good work. And it's amazing that you found a landing spot, because a lot of the officers and enlisted at Kessel Run have separated because there's not a landing spot for them. That's something I think we're really trying hard to look at and improve upon within the Army software factory model, which you'll hear later today. I don't want to spoil their conversation, but really taking those lessons learned from the Air Force and seeing how there are so many challenges there. And I think that it comes ultimately down to talent management. And that is an incredibly difficult nut to crack. I think that,
Preach.
yeah. So, we're talking a lot about, things that make us successful and focus on outcomes like people, like culture. Um, but like in a typical software company, you're not looking at those success markers. You're looking at revenue, you're looking at user adoption and monetization of a user, you're looking at ad revenue. And in your case, you're looking to make sure that you're getting startups connected with the government, which is incredibly important. So what does success look like for each of you? Austin, you talked about OKRs. I'd love to hear kind of what are those success metrics that demonstrate that you're focused on outcomes?
Sure. I mean, we have our kind of token Dora metrics, publicity we put out. And, a lot of that is kind of output if you think about it, right? How many times you've committed to a master branch, like that's great, but like, what did that do? When people come through downtown in San Antonio, I usually say like coming from the operations side of the Air Force, when we were working with, space software that I saw airmen get critical errors from that, were their fault, but in my opinion was just lack of software. I mean, it's near and dear to my heart, right? I watch people lose stripes, lose clearances over things that I think we could have fixed with technology. So to me, it's all about apps in production, right? That's at least a first start. If it's not in production, it doesn't matter. Production over PowerPoint is the thing we like to say a lot, right? Like it doesn't, like the slides of architecture don't matter if you haven't delivered anything. And then how frequently can you deliver there, right? How quickly can you change, whether that's patching for cybersecurity, whether that's maintenance because you got something, you want to tweak one thing or another, or it's new feature delivery. I mean, a lot of this has been proven. I think you've seen some publicity from Kessel Run lately, and Platform One has done some of the same. The evacuations out of Afghanistan, for example, right? We were able to deploy apps that were used for C-17 and KC-10 scheduling. A lot of that stuff would not have happened without airmen and government-led software that understood the problem. I mean, I was receiving phone calls from C-17 pilots in CENTCOM at the time, right? Like that. Who are they going to call? Like, they're not going to call up random vendor usually, right? They want to call a government person and say, hey, where is my thing? Where is the accountability? And it's the government's job to be accountable for those things.
Yeah. Megan, Rachel, go ahead.
Yeah, I kind of want you. Sure. Well, I'll start with the tech companies that you mentioned, because I know a lot of times we'll say, those two worlds are very, very different, but they're really not, if you think about it. They're building software to provide value for someone to stay competitive. We are in that exact same spot. We have to stay competitive with our adversaries who are cranking out code and AI algorithms at a speed we just haven't been able to match. And so the focus on that maniacal focus on how do I keep a user is something that I would love to see us adopt as we put out our software. So all the metrics you just mentioned are so critical. Like how fast can we patch? How fast can we deliver the software? How fast are we iterating? But are we keeping them? Are the users staying on the platforms that we built? And if they're not, what's the one thing that I could do that would keep them there longer? That's the feature to build, nothing else. Forget all the rest. If it doesn't keep one more person on the software, forget it. And you have to prioritize and stay really hyper-focused on it. And then that speed is just so important. So I don't think those two worlds are actually all that far apart. It's just that extra focus on the human-centered and the users and the people that are adopting it. If you don't involve the users of the software, no matter if it's just some like a plugin for Outlook to make it less terrible, whatever it might be, then the outcomes that we're defining are just going to be wrong. And we do that even internally to Decode. We have a platform where we run our acceleration and our training off of. And a lot of times I find our product teams sit around and they say, well, I think what they would really want is, I'm like, well, why don't you just go ask, right? And then when you do, we're wrong 50% of the time, and then it allows us to adjust. And I think sometimes, especially in government organizations, we are looking to build the thing that we know that will make leadership happy. But at the end, if you fast forward 3 years, no one's using it, then it's a hard bounce to find.
And I think something I learned at Kessel Run too, and I'm seeing it here, and it is all over, is also taking along those sponsors, those stakeholders along on this journey as well. As much as we absolutely value and want to keep our users at the forefront of everything that we're doing, we can't forget that those users also have leadership, that the acquisition programs also have sponsors who feel ingrained, feel a huge responsibility to what is delivered, what ends up there. And the plan, the process, all of that. Want to be as tied to that as possible. So I think something too that's a huge goal of ours right now is to try and keep that in mind and see how can we involve them like earlier. How can we work with them, shifting that mindset? How do we kind of involve them in the processes and in our design workshops and in how we map our workflows with our users, like have them see those things. Can they start to think about outcomes? Could they even help us define some of those? That's super, super important. And another piece that as if we could figure that out, like we're the dream team. Be great.
I love that. Something that what's cool about the software factory is that we aren't an acquisition office, so we can pick kind of products that we think are going to be useful. And one of the big things we care about is, do we have senior leader buy-in? Because we're going to be disruptive. We're going to want to talk to users and not user representatives. We're going to want to actually talk to the users. And like, do we have that top cover to make sure that we can do that? And that's one of our main criteria when we're selecting a problem. So
there's a really fun exercise. It's pretty fast. I call it the no matrix, where I like to list out who is everyone that's going to possibly say no and why. And then you craft, okay, well, how can I get them to care? Maybe they're in acquisitions, maybe they're finance, maybe they're in legal. What is it, their personal interest on why they would say no? And then from day one, start involving them and kind of working on that. And there's a great story back. Is anyone familiar with 18F?
Yeah.
So kind of a software factory type group. And they ran into the biggest problem just coming up with the name, right? Every name that they came up with for months and months and months. No, until finally on their no matrix was legal. And they said, well, you just come to the brainstorming session with us. And they had a name within 30 minutes because they all agreed they wouldn't get sued for that one. So, it's a really great story when you hear them talk about it, just how much, if they had just involved the no people earlier, it would have saved them at least 3 months on a name. Yeah.
Or you can just be like Kessel Run and say, I'm not going to listen to the lawyers. I'm going to name myself Kessel Run. Yeah, which also a good strategy, I think.
Sometimes.
Yeah. So we're gonna take an interlude here and do a lightning round. So our wonderful panelists have not seen these questions, and we're just gonna go rapid fire through them. And want everybody obviously to give their response. So we'll start with an easy one. Favorite technology book?
I'll go with the Unicorn Project.
Solid.
I'm gonna go back to my roots of product design, so the design of everyday things.
Obviously awesome. It's a great product book.
Ooh, I love it. If you could be any tech hero for a day, who would you be?
It's supposed to be lightning. I was going to say Elon Musk because I'm just so fascinated to know what it's like to be in his brain for a hot second. It might be terrifying.
Man, I'm an Elon Musk fanboy too, so she took my answer. I'll go with Steve Jobs, another kind of obvious answer.
This is where I was really afraid my mind would just go blank. This is hard. I'm just blanking on the Netflix CEO. I feel like I was talking to somebody about this yesterday, like Netflix, just everything Netflix, literally anybody that works at Netflix. We'll just go with that.
Okay, I like it. What senior leader did you fangirl or fanboy over when you met with them? So you had to physically meet them. I guess virtually too is fine. No, any senior leader. Could be DoD, it could be federal government.
I could do it. Yeah. Huge fangirl moment. General Mark Walsh. Just amazing human being. The first person I feel like I ever met that really truly tried to understand his people and just like develop a significant relationship with them. And
all right, I'll take my favorite DV visit I've ever had. Chief Bass. I didn't know a lot about her before she came. She was relatively new, I think, when she came down. The most, not a software expert, right, by any means, but so people and mission focused, but so quickly understood the value. And paired program with one of our enlisted troops, and sent some code to production. And it was a super cool experience. I just felt like she really got it and really cared about people.
Okay, I feel on the spot because I'm not in the government to know if I was like pick a favorite or something. I'll put Chief Brown up there. He was very refreshing. Just seemed to get it. Was really an innovator at heart. And I think in our discussion, one of the biggest things was, why am I not getting the napkin ideas? I get them and they're fully baked. And you could see that like he means the words that he put in the letter.
That's awesome. Lean, Agile, Kanban, or Scrum? Or Kanban. I guess I'm saying it wrong, but
I think it depends on what the team is delivering. Our service teams usually use Kanban, but product development Scrum.
or that's fine.
We'll just go with, I'm just going to say lean agile. I feel like we do a lot of things, but I would say I like simple. So
We just make it up. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's hard because they're so buzzy. So I feel like at least at Decode, we've taken, like we read all the methodologies and then we say that makes sense, and then we made our own.
Perfect. So your own brand.
Yeah.
Decode Agile. It's a
Yeah.
new one. Trademark it.
I decoded all of them. And,
Well, I had this question, but you both already answered it. Elon Musk or Mark Cuban. So we got two Elons.
although apparently you don't talk to Mark Cuban if Dallas isn't doing well. So Elon Musk.
Yeah, you know my answer.
yeah, I'd say Elon. I guess we're just team Elon. Somebody
Gotcha.
tell him.
Yeah, I'm a Mark Cuban fan, so it's cool. Are themed software factories cool? Yes or no?
That's such a trick question. You can't give me that. If anyone understands the meaning behind Kobayashi Maru, I have to say yes, they're cool. Of course, I have to say that, and I believe it.
So I am not a sci-fi nerd at all, and they all seem to gravitate towards sci-fi. We let our developers a lot of times pick things like in Mattermost and 200-person channels, and sometimes we don't like the results of that. But power to the people. I think what's important is to have a brand, right? There's something that people rally around, no matter what that is, even if it's Baby Yoda.
Mine might be a little bit more unpopular. I think there's a lot of value. I think you need a brand and something to rally around, but you need to also be mindful of not alienating the other people that are not involved in said brand. Baby Yoda is cute for everybody, so maybe that works. But I do see not as much software factories, but I would include them. Innovation pockets sometimes can go a little too extreme, and then other folks that they need to engage with are kind of feeling like an outsider looking in. So that's my unpopular opinion.
I think that's spot on. It's a good hot take. We have a spice-o-meter at Software Factory, 1 to 5 spices. So I think that was like a 1 spice.
1 spice?
Yeah.
So I need to get spicier. Okay.
If you could change anything that you've done in the last 3 months as part of your job, what would it be?
Taking things out of Confluence and Jira and putting them in PowerPoint for people.
That's a good one.
Ooh. I would have, and I've been in my job for like 3 months. So this is also, like, okay, I've been here for a quarter. What would I have started with? I would have, I think, tried to bring together all of our portfolio leadership and our like sponsored leadership together like ASAP as soon as possible.
So I'll go product related because that was a whole nother panel that I can answer that one. But there was a couple of months where we got a little distracted on the art of the possible of what we could build that delayed our roadmap because we kind of lost that focus of what's the next thing we should build that got one more customer or kept one more customer. And we started kind of evaluating tools and technologies that probably are a couple months out because we just need to keep going. So we lost some steam.
That's great. Mac or PC?
Mac. What?
I use Mac for all my like mobile devices, but I'm a PC guy.
No, boo, green messages, just Mac all the way.
Love it. And then last, Star Wars or Star Trek?
Yeah, I already admitted I'm not a sci-fi nerd, but I will say my daughter came home from kindergarten last year after May the 4th and like was really dejected that everybody knew what Star Wars was but her. And so against my wife's approval, we watched all 9 Star Wars movies over the summer, like an hour at a time on Fridays, which was a really great experience. So I'll go Star Wars.
I've never seen any of them.
Okay, there we go. That's fine.
That's okay. That's a spicy meter. I feel like I'm about to raise my hand as Hannah Hunt ever made me feel personally attacked because I worked at Kessel Run. That's Star Wars.
This one was
Kobayashi
for you.
Maru. Oh, gosh. Okay. Well, this is not at all Software Factory related. I just need to preface with that, but I would say Star Wars.
All right. I like it. I'm a Harry Potter girl myself, so
You get to break your own rules.
yeah,
It's not
I'm
fair.
moderating. It's fine. So and we have a little over 15 minutes left. Obviously, want to take questions if there are questions from the audience. But I really want to understand, what all the things that we've talked about. What are you seeing as your biggest challenges to success, and then what is the things that you need? What are your asks, your calls to action that you believe are going to make your organization more successful?
This is a really, really, really good question. I think definitely all of the DoD software factories, I think we all have our unique challenges. Some are common themes, but I think too, just in the nature of kind of our work, I think some pieces are a little more challenging than others. I'd say right now, I feel like getting everyone on the same page of understanding. I think since coming in and we have lots of different backgrounds. We're from all different kinds of career fields with different career experiences, and I think just level setting around the same understanding of what terms mean, what we're trying to do, what we're trying to get at, what the job at hand is, and maybe just not to get prescriptive of how, but maybe things that are important to consider. Everyone does things a little bit differently. Everybody learns a little bit differently. And I think right now, one of the biggest challenges is just communicating and then finding out from what was understood and then what was actioned. Where do we go? Where do we restart from there? What was missed, and how do we really try a different approach to try and understand that? For your second question, oh gosh, what was your second question? Call to action.
Yeah, what would be your based on this? What would be your ask, your call to action?
Yeah, I think as I'm coming into Kobayashi Maru, I'm learning just as everybody else. Trying to find the right ways to really support the teams and support the work that we're doing. And I think my call to action would just be to continue to kind of push the boundaries, be curious, and go on this journey of what this change in mindset really is, what that takes. I think that would be my call to action, and that's not just on the software factory. It's our stakeholders. It's everyone that we interact with. This is different, and I think it's okay to call that out. But it takes some trust, some buy-in, and maybe just some trying. Yeah.
We could spend a whole panel on this probably. Talent management's the easy one to pick on, so I'll ignore that one for this question since we've already talked about it. I think agility and acquisitions in general. We talked about this a little bit yesterday. I think we've developed a system around us, everything above us, that has been about acquiring aircraft and spacecraft, at least for the Air Force, right? Because that's the first 2 mission sets we were in. Bending metal takes a high entry barrier for anybody to engage, and it takes a long time. The funding and contracting cycles we have to support software do not support software very well. And we keep finding loopholes or maximizing gray space in order to do it successfully. And it's not my area of expertise whatsoever. I'm a computer engineer. I've worked with other smart PMs and contracting officers, thankfully, that have helped keep me out of trouble and teach me a few things along the way. But I think, I don't have solutions to that. You asked what worries me. I can't explain how much time I've done talking to, contracting officers or FM professionals, just why things need to be a little bit different or why we need to get to yes somehow. I think that kind of enablement and education is a really big problem. Call to action. What one thing would I change tomorrow that I think is pretty doable? Establish a career field and show that you value this career field. And there's probably multiple tracks within it, right? Shreds of it, if you will. But centralize the talent, deliberately management, establish something that's real and deliberately developed.
Yeah, so I think some of the biggest challenges that I've been able to observe across all the different organizations is not too dissimilar, but I see repeatedly organizations popping up to do similar things, which is fine. I'm not saying that's actually bad, but the lack of curiosity, I think, is one of the biggest detractors from the progress that can be made from organizations like software factories. And so, I think a lot of times we end up in an interesting spot. We're saying, well, you're starting to do something. I know this other group has tried that. Why don't you talk to them? And sometimes that willingness is really there, and sometimes it's not. And I think that would be one thing that I would say a call to action for anyone involved in the software factory or a lot of leadership ask a lot of questions and really understand what's been tried, what has worked, what hasn't worked. If you're a contracting officer, someone has done this before and they succeeded and they didn't go to jail. It's fine. Call them and ask them what they did. If you are a senior leader and there is a new software factory popping up, or you have teams that want to engage with them, there's a need there that people are crying out for something different and for help. Understand what that is and how you can be supportive of it. And I could just go on and on, but I think it really comes down to asking questions and sharing a lot of information. And there's a get to yes team out here. I know it. And you can see it in finance, you can see it in programmatics, you can see it in product. And I think increased curiosity.
I really like that. We have more time, so I've thought of some more questions in my head, so it's great. Something that I think is not always captured, but something that's really valuable is that all of these software innovation efforts, we all get along really well. Like in general, we all at the working level want to be successful and share information. And I just want to call that out because oftentimes it seems like in the LinkedIn or in the press, we're seen as, against one another, but really it's like we really do want to be successful. So what is your favorite cross organization experience? So it could have been you partnering with an organization to do something either government or non-government, but something that's software innovative related. I think for me, it was working with Austin on a lot of the talent management stuff when I was at Kessel Run, and just really connecting on the desire to build towards outcomes that like we're really focused on improving the workforce. So and we got along really. I mean, that's how we built our friendship relationship. Like it's great. So turn that question over to you guys.
I have the mic. I'll start.
Yeah.
So we had a company that came through our acceleration program, and they had some really fantastic work in an intelligence agency. And we happened to have a woman on our team that worked with it when she was in the agency itself. Huge fan, and thought, gosh, there is so much value add across so many agencies. And so we actually ran a couple of trainings where so in our training program for government innovators, and really anyone, you don't have to be an innovator, we work on workshopping problems and then how to navigate in your own bureaucracy to get to solutions. But we were able to bring CBP, this intelligence agency, and NGA together, the government stakeholders, to have a meaningful conversation, and they ended up adopting the technology and really expanding that same use case into other agencies, which was cool to see the cross-pollination, civilian intel and DoD.
That's really cool.
Yeah, Hannah just exposed our dirtiest secret, which is we all actually get along really well at the working level. So that was the first thing that came to mind, the example you already gave. The other one, so we've been working really closely with Kessel Run right now on open sourcing a lot of the tech baseline. And there's, just from a technology perspective, we're reusing, rehardening, redeploying the same manifest, the same component packages. Like there's no reason we should all do this. In fact, engineers find that really boring. They don't want to do that with their time. So there's a lot of work actually happening at the engineering level of people sharing code, which is fantastic. I think aside from that, I've been talking a lot with Lieutenant Colonel Max Rielet at Kessel Run, and there's I look at sometimes from just an organizational perspective, Kessel Run is so far ahead in just like understanding who they should be in like organizational theory, right? Like how do you organize your cybersecurity people? Like how do you do engagement with industry? Like there's some very like basic non-software at all related things that are just easy to talk through for people that have actually done it before. And I think just sharing those lessons learned with each other. I know yesterday it came up, they're like, hey, we should start a Slack channel. And it's like my eyes roll every time. I can't help it because like everybody has different chat apps. And then just next thing you know, there's 200 or 800. I think somebody mentioned the DevSecOps community practice has like 850 people in it. And at that point, like who's talking to who? And at the end of the day, we just text each other, like the old school, I guess not old school. We don't call each other. We text each other, and that's how work gets done. But I think that's the way real work gets accomplished, just sharing those lessons learned kind of a point to point sometimes.
Yeah, I feel like we are in touch enough that we understand maybe where another software factory is at, or what challenge they might have faced. That maybe if we are faced with the same thing, we know we can reach out, and I feel like we do have that network really nicely established. I've only been at KM for a little bit, so I at least know, like, I love everyone talks about Kessel Run coming from there. It's awesome. So we were able to collaborate, kind of working space ATO and ATO and showing that was possible, which was, I don't even think that it was believed maybe, or even like thought of as an option. And we just, the idea came about and they made it work, which was awesome. Aside from product, getting to be at Kessel Run, especially when we were kind of trying to figure out like the Z code prefix, which was kind of at least an attempt to try and like break out little stretches of specific skill sets and practices that the software factories need and dev and design and PMing. And on the design side, I was able to work with DAU to try and kind of how do we think about user-centered design? How do we try and train others? And maybe it's not just folks to become designers, but maybe it's folks just from program offices just to think a little bit differently, ask some different questions. How do you approach a problem? How do you look at it, and how do you identify maybe who you need to speak with? And even just like skills, different thoughts of that are huge for acquisition offices that never get to speak with their users. Software acquisition, larger hardware pieces, systems. That's kind of true all around. So getting the opportunity to work with DAU and kind of partner in that way was really cool. And I don't think that was just myself on the design side, that we were doing that on the acquisition side. I think you're pretty familiar with that kind of stuff. And on the PM side and on the dev side, I think we've been able at Kessel Run, coming from Kessel Run, and I think the other software factories are starting there, where we're sharing those practices and really getting to hopefully share it to the rest of the DoD, whether you're in a software factory or not.
I couldn't agree more. We did get a question, so which is exciting for us. So are there, speaking of ATOs, different ATO, authority to operate, any lessons learned about striving for more open, collaborative partnerships within the security constraints of a defense work environment? This, I think, it's a great example of questions, both from an industry perspective, how do you engage in this very conceived high barrier to entry, but also, how do you collaborate with vendors that want to work with you and build software, but maybe don't understand the security constraints or landscape. You want to start, Austin?
Sure. I mean, security constraints of a defense work environment is a very vague interpretation. So I'm gonna take a stab at what I think that means. I think from like how we engage with industry, and I learned this from the AFWorks team and stealing Joey Aurora onto our team too, but we kind of do what I call active market research, which is we go find the companies ourselves and then introduce them to people that can help get them on contract. Instead of just like putting out a white paper and reading papers, we actually like invite people to come in and, I don't know, talk to us face to face, which is interesting. The other thing from a security constraint perspective, this made people pretty nervous when we first did it, although it's been more accepted, is we mirror some of our open source projects to GitHub, so like commercial industry can see it instead of hiding it behind things. And so there's actually a lot more you can do from an open source perspective than people give us credit for sometimes. So those are, I'm not sure what they meant by security constraints, but those are a couple things that we do.
If you're working with companies that don't know the security constraints, shameless plug, send them to Decode. That's what our accelerator does. We can get them there faster and make them less risky to work with. So, but I think a lot of it comes down to the empathy between the parties. So understanding, what are the motivations of the organization? Maybe it's a tech company that you're working with. That business development individual might get fired if they don't end up getting on contract at some point. So where are they coming from, and vice versa? Or even if you're collaborating across organizations, awesome, you guys have really good relationships. What are the motivations of the person you're working with leadership? So at the end of the day, I sound like a broken record, comes back to asking a lot of questions, but I think understanding the motivations from each side is really important.
I don't think I'd have too much to add here, other than I think that there's opportunities, like even it's like hands on keyboard, like working with our development teams, or it's kind of working with our leadership teams where we're just trying to approach problems, approach the way we're thinking differently. You can do that in an unclassified space. So I think that there's opportunities, definitely opportunities to collaborate, and it's not restrictive to that security piece.
That's awesome. I just want to thank you all so much for this really wonderful panel. Megan, Austin, Rachel, this was excellent to get to have all three of you here this afternoon. Stick around. There's a few more panels on the Army Software Factory track, and look forward to what's up next. So thank you.